Welcome back to Energetically You. I'm your host, Megan Swan, a wellness coach and consultant, and the founder of Megan Swan Wellness and the Sustainable Integrated Wellness Approach. Today, we are speaking with Melisa Keenan. She is a keynote speaker, a international and USA Today bestselling author, and she is the go-to intuitive intimacy expert for the top 1%. She helps high-achieving business owners have more confidence, connection, ease, and trust in their personal relationships through mastery of intimacy and the feminine, masculine energy dynamics. More than just a 4-year coach or a certified master of the Gibson-Banning method, we'll have to dig into that and find out what it is. Melisa is a true expert on healing broken and strained relationships, starting with her own. Having overcome separation from her husband and the hurt of betrayal and ultimately rebuilt and repaired her marriage, Melisa now has supported women, men, and couples to feel seen, heard, cherished, appreciated, and fully self-expressed in their relationships while expanding their business. While she is not in the middle of everyone's private lives, you will find her dancing, singing, working, and praying at her hobby ranch in northern Nevada, where she lives with her husband CJ and their 4 children. All so interesting. I can't wait to get to know her better. So let's dive in. Welcome, Melisa. I'm so excited for this conversation. I feel like we have a lot in common, and I have a feeling even maybe more we're going to find out in this conversation. But just based on our interests and both being mothers and all the things. So are you a little bit warmer now? Did you find something cozy to put on? How are you?
I'm good. I've been in my office already for a couple of hours, and so I was, needing some warmth.
Where are you located?
I live in Reno, Nevada, which most people associate with Vegas, and it's nothing like Vegas. We are full of snow. I think it's 20 something out right now, 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So
it's chilly. It's fresh.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, I'm so curious. Let's dive into your history as a coach. And, often I think it starts with our own journey. So for you, kind of what was the catalyst that brought you into this sphere?
Yeah. I didn't know that coaching was even a thing. But my life brought me through certain circumstances that coming out on the other side of, and having felt like that was completely impossible. And how did that happen? I knew when I had the peace and the joy from coming out the other side, I knew I had to help other women. And so that's kind of, why I decided to get into this, to go into now some of the particulars of what I went through. I grew up, well, really, I feel like it starts with my ancestry. Like, there has been trauma and abuse and addiction and betrayal and sexual misconduct for as far back as the stories exist in both sides of my family line. And I was raised constantly being told things like, avoid alcohol. You have addiction literally in your DNA. Avoid anything that could be seeming, like it could create an addiction, etc. But no one was talking to me about the sexual addiction that existed in my family lineage. And it goes deep, How deep can we go today, Megan?
Oh, I'm open to deep. There's really no conversation I'm not willing to have. So my first reaction is like, you've just come to this deeper lens and understanding due to your own work, or because the things that you're touching on, like, I'm not sure I would even have that context of my grandparents or my great grandparents. Like, those weren't conversations that were had.
Right. Yeah, it's required some digging for sure, because everybody's so tight-lipped about what really goes on. But ultimately, when you have family members who have done such grievous things that have caused such big consequences, and so many ripples in the water, then it can't be hidden. So, I have an uncle who committed suicide when his adult daughters were on their way to have him arrested for how he treated them in their upbringing. My mother was sexually abused by her father for the first 14 years of her life. My grandpa on my dad's side cheated on his wife for about 6 years while she was dying, and brought his mistress into the home to care for my grandmother while she died. And then when my mom got very sick, my dad basically did the same thing, left her, cheated on her. And that's my upbringing. That's my people. Those are my people. Lots of pain and heartache. And so growing up, it was like, it's a friggin' scary world out there. And I learned to stand strong in masculine energy. On the outside, I was girly, but on the inside, I was like, don't mess with me. And I'm going to be a career woman, and I have a focused plan, and I'm not going to let my heart out. And thankfully, like, God really worked on me, and opened me up to take some risks, to have love in my life, to have a family. I mean, I sit here now married. We're about to have our 15-year wedding anniversary, and I have 4 kids. So clearly I have made some changes. But how
old are your kids? What's the range?
Yeah, 13 to 6. Yeah.
Congratulations. 15 years.
Yes.
It's not a common thing anymore these days.
Yeah. So, I actually joined a church when I was 18, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and family is a huge component of the faith. And it really had me question some of my resolve around not having a family, around, all of these things. And I started to feel like my heart was changing. And so I got married very young, thinking that there was all this insurance in my marriage because he was also a member of the church. We got married in the temple, which is like the highest honor in our church. And in our faith, we believe you're sealed together for time and all eternity, which is so beautiful. Like, we believe families are eternal, and it's just the most beautiful. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I can bring so much healing to my family line, and I can bring so much healing to this family. It's that we didn't know how to do these things. I can do it differently. So I came into my family with all of that, and my faith is beautiful. I love the faith I belong to, but I also brought in all these extra pressures on myself, right? Like, basically it was like, okay, you're going to do it, and you better do it perfect. So hard. And so, you can imagine
pressure on a relationship.
Exactly. I was extremely micromanaging and controlling in my marriage, and just terrified, survival mode, terrified of the inevitable, what could happen. Like, so bad. I could go on about that. I mean, I used to bring up the topic of divorce all the time just so that we could talk about it, so we could avoid it. Like, it was so, oh my, I have so much compassion on my, 20-some-year-old self who was just so scared. And so you can imagine that the horror and shock that I felt when I found out that my husband had a secret sex addiction. He was addicted to pornography, and he was pretty sure he'd been addicted since he was 9. Talking about this is not something I take lightly. It's something we've discussed a lot. And he's always said, if you feel like it will help people, like, share. Absolutely. He's an incredible man and has worked through all of that. But, when that hit, and when I found out that for 5 years in my marriage, there was a secret addiction that I didn't even know about, that was just like everything from my ancestry, it was my breaking point. It was like, how could God ask me to go through this? So it was hard. We separated for 6 months. It took us about 3.5 years total of work to decide if this marriage was going to last or not. And probably...
Did you already have kids at that point?
Yeah, we did. When I asked him to move out, our third had just been born. She was 2 months old. So it was so painful. Like, I had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and an infant, all of them in diapers still in some capacity. And when I asked him to move out, I didn't know the extent of his addiction. And a lot of people may not know this about, like, pornography addiction is kind of like a seed addiction, in the sense that, it could lead to deeper addictions, potential, all kinds of horrible things. So I really didn't know if asking him to move out, I was just giving him permission to go move in with a girlfriend, or to, go live some crazy lifestyle as another person that I didn't even know. But I knew things couldn't continue the way that they had. It was so hard to look at him and realize that he had been doing things, had been in some ways a different person than I thought. But it was also equally challenging, like just as equally painful, to look at the ways in the marriage I had contributed to both of our misery. Like, yes, he had this addiction, and I also had all this trauma that I hadn't resolved. So yeah, we built back from that. And I would say it was probably about 2.5 years after he moved back in, of trying to come back together, having peace for a while, then feeling like there's a car crash, having to go back to our own lane and work on ourselves again. And I'm trying to, doing that over and over until it finally felt like it stuck. And I can remember sitting in my bedroom. Actually, nothing extraordinary was happening. I was just sitting on the bed, and I was looking around at my home and my kids, and I think my husband was getting ready for work in the morning, and I just was like, oh my gosh, we've done it. Like, I am so blissfully connected to this man, and I'm so happy with who I am as a person. We did it, and other women need to know, we did this, and I had surrounded myself with women who had gone through things I had gone through. And so we were all like convinced. We had been sold a fairy tale, and we were angry about it, and it was like, it's not a fairy tale. It's just different than what we thought. It's so much more real than we could have ever imagined, and that's when I kind of realized it was intimacy. It was that true connection that I had been missing my whole life by being too focused on survival. I couldn't connect. I didn't know how to really, truly be intimate or connecting with someone until going through this process with my husband.
Yeah, I don't know what you think about this, but I think the way the fairy tale, whether it be in the religious context or outside of that, the Disney version even, is sold to us, it also keeps you on this sort of superficial plane and not looking for those deeper ways to connect with people, or probably not giving us the tools, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and I've had women say this to me before. They will say to me, I don't want to know those things about my husband. Meaning, it's scary for us to know our husband's weaknesses, to know even his feelings, certainly to know his past or decisions that he made that he regrets. Like, as much as he carries shame about those things, oftentimes it's the women who are perpetuating, like, I don't want to know, because that destroys my fairy tale. But what we don't realize is the fairy tale, we can feel the fakeness of it. We can feel constantly this longing for, like, I want something more. I want to be so cherished. I want to be seen and known in these deep innermost parts of me. and we don't know how to access it. It's actually by knowing all the things, like really coming forward. And that requires that we do that with ourselves too.
Yes.
So it's scary.
I call it shadow work. I don't know what terms you use, but I do want to delve into your definition and your work and specifically around intimacy and rebuilding. But can we go back a little bit here? Because I mean, I can deeply resonate with your experience. You know, in my case, it wasn't pornography, but there were like major breaches in trust and betrayal at the beginning of my now 12-year relationship. And I feel like we shockingly do so many things in our lives based on just what society has planted in us. Like, we're more concerned, like, what is someone else going to think that I'm deciding to forgive this behavior versus like, how do I actually feel about it? But also, how did you rebuild the trust? Because I think, like in my case, that was the hardest thing to, because you've made the decision, you want to forgive on some level. Obviously you never forget, but it's like for me, it was a daily practice of reframing, but it was a lot of things. And I think at the end of the day, for me now, it's just being so grateful for having a partner. Like we're on a spiritual journey together. And it's so, to me, what I value is having a partner that knows all of my darkest, deepest secrets, and I know his, and also that only wants, you know, growth and expansion, and, you know, wants me to develop as an individual as much as he's doing the same for himself. Yeah, I guess I would just completely redefine like what an ideal partnership is compared to how I was raised.
Absolutely. I love this conversation so much, and that you have the depth of understanding around this. Because so often people want to know about this and then they don't really get it. And you get it. And I love that. I think that will provide a lot of value for the listeners as well. Because it really is completely different than what we're told, what society tells us. And I think that piece around making a lot of our decisions or worrying about what society will say or what people around us will say, like it goes so much deeper than, you know, we might say, oh, I'm not the kind of person that worries about what other people say. But inherent in our conditioning is the reality that everything we were taught is based on, you know, beliefs held in society and may or may not be based on truth. And so I could remember, and, you know, when I was going through so much of this, we weren't telling a lot of people. I didn't know how to navigate it. My husband and I couldn't even really talk about finances or raising our kids, let alone talk about, you know, can I share this with people? I shared it very, you know, trusted.
Strategically.
Yes, exactly. And I was at this workout group with a bunch of women. We would get together in the mornings and do these workout videos and stuff, you know. It was a big group, maybe 10 or 15 women. And somebody's sister had just discovered her husband's adultery. And all the women were, you know, oh my gosh, right? And the sister's not there, so everyone can just talk openly about what's happening. Mm-hmm. And I'm like dying inside, like, where's this conversation going to go? And, you know, everybody is like, oh, there is no way. I would not stay. There is no way, blah, 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 right? Like saying all these judgments and stuff. And I couldn't do it anymore. And I just said, you know what, you guys, you might say that, but you honestly don't know how you would respond until you're in this situation. You don't know. And really that, I don't need a man, no one will cross me kind of attitude that we carry comes from being raised in a feminist culture where likely our ancestors and a lot of the women we know were wronged by men. You know, we were raised in this patriarchal society where we're taking our voice back. And so it like completely negates any gray area or room for human behavior, right? Human error. it's not that cut and dry and simple. And that haunted me so much. Like am I not being the strong woman that I'm supposed to be by staying in this marriage and trying to make this work?
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. But I think, you also need to, it's real that we are social beings. So there is like a deep psychological fear of not being accepted by the group, by not doing what we've been told, the group dictates.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't think there's a lot of, I do see more and more women openly speaking about, deciding to make it work and to forgive and to stay for whatever the betrayal was, right?
Yeah.
There's a massive range. But yeah, it's more like figuring out what you want and then finding the space. Or, maybe it's just about giving them another chance. And like, do you need to give them another chance till the end of time? No.
Right. Yep. And I think then that kind of, naturally feeds into your other point around trust. I realized that I didn't know how to trust at all, actually. I had never extended trust to my husband. You would think that by marrying someone, that meant you were putting a lot of trust in that person. But I didn't know how to actually trust. I didn't have trust in anything. Which is why I showed up with so much fear and scarcity and overcompensated with my masculine energy to try to control my environment, to try and, control the outcomes that I experienced in my life. I didn't know how to trust. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Like I can like place my hand on my heart and look at my inner child and my young woman, inner young woman, and be like, of course you didn't. Like, look at the examples you had. Look at all the relationship with men that have existed in your upbringing. Like, of course you didn't know how. And so to build back trust is such an interesting conversation. I feel like it has more to do with me learning to trust in the universe or the divine and in myself, honestly, more than anything else. Because always inherent in a marriage is the vulnerability and risk that the other person has to choose you every day, just like you have to choose them every day. And that could change at any time. Like it could. Certainly now where we're at and where he's at in his recovery and all of that, like I don't sit around worrying if he's going to cheat on me or worrying if he's going to go run to his addiction or these kinds of things anymore, because I've seen over and over there's a predictability to his recovery and his behavior now. And, the closeness and connection that we feel, like there's a trust in that too. And more than anything, there's a trust in me that like, I know myself. I know where I'm going. I know I can trust myself. I can rely on myself. And then there's a trust in God that everything is happening according to plan. Nothing in my journey. And that has come from hours and hours and years of searching, right? To know actually that everything that has happened in my life was not amiss or awry. And that's hard. Like I used to hear people say that. And I used to think like, yeah, maybe except for this. Yeah, maybe except for this thing with my husband, because he definitely threw a wrench in my plans, right? I used to honestly say, I'll be grateful for every trial that happens in my life except this one. But the reality is, like, we can't actually screw up the great design for our life. We're not actually that powerful, and that's a relief. And so everything that happens according to plan, and the universe is conspiring for my good always. It's just sometimes looks way different than we thought, right? As I look back on what my husband and I experienced, and and I've told him this before, and it's actually become like an anchor for us when other challenges arise, is that we both knew our life and our marriage was not where we wanted it to be. It was not as close and connected as we wanted. It didn't feel as pure of heart as we really both knew was possible. Like, we both have tremendous faith and really good intentions, and we wanted those things, but we didn't know how to get them. And what I thought was the worst thing that ever happened to us actually ended up being like the forest fire that came through and cleared the land so that we could start building on brand new soil. And that's exactly what we had to do. It was so perfect. So seeing all of that and really seeking to like do the work to come to those answers and get that understanding that can't come from our tangible, like it has to come from going within, from that feminine space within. Getting those answers has made all the difference in me being able to really trust in general as a principle, like embodied trust.
Yeah, for me, it really forced me to, because previous to this relationship, I had like a 3 year like expiry date on most of my relationships, or less, right? Like anytime anything got remotely complicated, it was like, okay, bye. For me, it was trusting this internal instinct that although I had all of this information that by society standards mean I do X, Y, Z, but I'm like, something in me doesn't want to do that. I want to stay here and figure out like, why do I not want to immediately follow the prescription path? This happens, you do this. And it made me confront the reality. Like, I had to learn how to forgive first myself. I'd never forgiven myself for anything up until that point in my life. And yet I'd been in multiple situations where I'd done something that someone else had it to be the bigger person and decide whether they're going to forgive me. And they weren't, either tried and weren't capable or didn't even try. And so just being on the flip side of that narrative and knowing ultimately I'm not going to be able to connect deeply with anyone unless I bridge this gap internally. And then, yeah. So let's talk intimacy toolbox. What are some ways that, maybe people aren't necessarily trying to bridge like such a massive, betrayal gap or, really a massive thing around trust. But I mean, I could just speak more so from my experience as a woman, like any kind of like I think intimacy, but like really like sexual connection with my partner is so emotional, so like any little thing is off on the emotional side of our relationship. For me, there's like a kind of break in my interest. Really curious. So what are some of your sort of favorite tools to help couples come back from, big or small sort of disconnect?
It helped us a lot to have some framework around connection. And it's difficult because in the betrayal recovery space, there's a lot of talk about codependency, which is valid. There's a lot to be gained from that. But then there also comes a point where the conversation around independence and interdependence ends up just feeling like just live separate lives. And so navigating that was really challenging for us. What we had to do many times, as I referred to before, was really go back to our own lane and kind of leave each other alone for some time. And so I think it's important to say that, because if there has been a huge betrayal like that, that actually was a huge trust builder. That was a huge message about the commitment level in our partnership, that it was like, I can't really meet your needs right now. You can't really meet my needs right now, but I'm still willing to stay and work on this relationship. And this is funny, but we have a dispute about how long this actually lasted. I think we didn't have sex for a year. He says maybe it was 6 months. You would think we would know this for sure, but we don't. But it was very strategic. There was a period of time where I just couldn't. Like, I couldn't reconcile all the parts of him that I had seen and the ways that he had hurt me. Anytime I tried to engage in sex, I would just come unglued. I would just, either it was like rage, or it was pain, or I was sobbing, or I was just so full of self-doubt and like, what's wrong with me? Like, it was just a wall over and over. And my relationship with my own turn on and not being as easy into being turned on and being ready and open and willing for sex, didn't start there. It started before then, certainly when we felt like there wasn't like the kind of quality of connection that we wanted in the relationship. Like that was my biggest indicator, was like, something is off. Because in the beginning, I really wanted you, and now things feel different and I can't figure out what it is. I mostly just blamed myself, and, learned better on that now, and help women to, kind of find empowerment. Like, your lack of desire is calling you towards something. Like, let's get curious about it. So anyway, we did, though, in our trying to build back together, we went either 6 months or a year without having sex, and built intimacy in other ways. At the time, we didn't call it intimacy. What we did was we sat down and determined what is the primary thing we're wanting to experience, or value, if you will, that we're wanting to experience by sex. My husband was like, this is what I want with you all of the time. And I was like, well, I want connection with you, but I don't want sex. I can't get there yet. And so we determined connection was really what we both wanted. And once we got to that value, and this was all through lots of stumbling. Now I have clear words around it because I guide people through this all the time. But once we got to that value, we were able to then come up with strategies that created connection that maybe didn't include sex. So a lot of the time, the conversation of initiation would instead sound like, hey, I really want to connect with you. I knew that meant he wanted sex, and I had to evaluate, am I there for that or not? And usually I would say, okay, I'm open to connecting, but not that way. How else can we connect? And we played chess. With 4 kids, like, our kids would go to bed and we would sit down and play chess, which does not sound near as exciting as sex. And I can promise you it was not. It was really sweet, actually. We played on my late father's chipped up chess set that he had made for an old girlfriend, and it out of porcelain, or probably clay, figures and everything. It was all chipped up, and we would pull out this very broken, chipped up chess set, which felt so symbolic of our very broken, chipped up marriage. And and even the board itself, this wooden board, one of the sides was like falling off. We just put it on. We'd play chess together, and it healed so much, because it was just one little thing, layer upon layer of like, hey, we're in this together. Hey, I'm in this for the long haul with you. Hey, no matter how long I have to wait, like, and I didn't take that for granted. I wasn't just like, oh, okay, fine then, because I never want to have sex again. And I talk to a lot of women who are in that space. I get that. But I saw how much he was trying. It made me want to heal my own relationship with sex and heal our relationship, so I could get to a point where we could be more intimate. And and so I share a lot of story in this because it's like tools, right? Like, I don't act like a typical expert, in the sense that when someone comes to me, we're going to listen to their personal circumstances, and we're going to identify what the next best tool is for them. And each person needs something different. And then each partnership is like a soul of its own. It needs something different. And I'm not really here to tell people what to do. I can give suggestions and then guide them to their inner wisdom. And so if I were to offer one tool above all else, it would be go within. great intimacy with yourself, which means your intuition, understanding your feelings and your desires, and understanding what all of that is guiding you towards in terms of what you deeply value and what you need in a relationship, so that then you can confidently go forward and say, I think this might be what we need. And use that, Certainly I help people with tools around communication and stuff like that. But when it comes to restoring intimacy, we have to figure out, okay, like, where are you? And then what's that next tiny step you're willing to take? Because there's a reason why we're all not in intimately connected relationships. We're all terrified, and we've been hurt, and our parents have been hurt, and our ancestry has, proven to us that intimacy is scary and a place of risk.
Love that, though. I love that sort of first going within, finding that personal intimacy, but then also getting to a place that you can have a shared understanding of like what are the values that we're seeking in this intimacy, in this sexual relationship, in connecting in that way, and just shifting like it into connection instead of some sort of other objective that we usually associate with sex with, that I think that can just takes like a lot of pressure off, and therefore allows that space to cultivate again into something really sweet.
I see people needing this more than we would realize. Like, it's not just when you have experienced giant betrayal. For instance, I have a client right now who had kind of just some tricky things that happened. Her dad had some weird things that happened when she was a young girl. And it meant that he went to some sort of recovery center for a year when she was a young girl. And so for her, being able to draw that connection and go, oh, wow, I've carried trauma around trusting the masculine, trusting men, and that has translated into sexual trauma. And now I, approach my husband this way because of how we approached my dad, even though her dad was a stellar father and, it affected her life when she was just a babe and stuff. And yet, like, it really has affected how she shows up in her relationship. So I share that to say, then imagine if you do have some things that we might consider as more like massive traumas. I'll have women come to me and say, well, yeah, I was raped, but I'm sure that's not affecting what I'm experiencing in my current relationship. And it's like, I'm sure it is. Until you've done the work, until you've brought these pieces forward, as painful as that is and as scary as that is, it is vital to the health of your current life in general, in whole, definitely your current relationship. And I'm happy to say now we have lots of other values that we go after when it comes to sex. Like, this process is a healing process that can launch you into sky's the limit, And we're about adventure, and we're about spirituality in sex, and we're like, we've just blossomed so much. And I can say that there are even times I want it and he doesn't. We never thought that would be the case. Like, there's so
full circle.
Yeah, so much healing available.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your personal experience and your wisdom. What's the best way for people to connect with you if they're feeling called to work with you?
Yeah, Megan, thank you so much for holding such a deep space. This conversation's powerful, and not many people are willing to go this deep. So I thank you. And I'm sure your listeners thank you too. I have a free intimacy guide that I would love for people to come and check out. It's a great place to start in terms of doing that intimacy with yourself. It brings you through the process I just described with feelings and values, and then it helps you create a statement that is like more an expression of what's really going on that you can then choose to share with someone if you want. And so I highly recommend go check that out. Of course, that will bring you into my email community so you can get a sense of what else is going on in our space. But I've also got a Facebook group that I'm running, and I run a 10-month long mastermind hybrid one-on-one experience with women, so that you're also surrounded by other women who are going through a similar journey with healing and restoring intimacy and finding harmony in masculine and feminine energy and that sort of thing. And so, I'd love to connect with anyone who this stuff resonates with.
Beautiful. Lots of options. I love it. We'll share all that in the show notes. And I feel like we're going to be in touch, Melisa. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you greatly. And if you are appreciating the show and you wish to support us in a small way, you can do that by rating us on Apple iTunes. You could share one of your favorite episodes with a good friend who you think would enjoy it. And you can subscribe to the show. All those things help us get more eyes on the podcast. So if you want to connect with me, you can find me on all platforms at Megan Swan Wellness. You can check out the website, meganswanwellness.com. I hang out mostly on Instagram and LinkedIn, so please drop me a message and tell me what was your major takeaway from the show. Have a beautiful week wherever you are in the world. Sending my love.